saying? Oh, meeting is being recorded. Oh, okay, that's you saying it's being, yeah, okay. And then I can half see you. Oh, where did the voice record go? Crap, hang on.
That's all right. Take your time.
Okay, there it is. All right, I'll press record, and then, do you reckon if I then minimize it, it should still record, right?
Yeah.
Okay, all right, cool, because then I can see you and it's more like we're having a chat.
Yeah, it's a bit more.
Okay, should I press go now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because we can always, like I said, the editor, we can just have like a really informal conversation, and she'll just she's able to just kind of when we get into our flow, we can it'll be a bit better. So basically what I'll do is I'll do like a voiceover as an introduction to you and who you are and what you do, and I can send you what I've come up with, but it's basically just what's on your website, and it said, social justice lawyer, previously worked as a children's lawyer, youth worker, mum of two, living in Sydney. You're also a writer, and you've done some ministerial, just what's on your hundreds and thousands.
That sounds good.
Okay, so that way we can just kind of start talking and just
get totally
into it. And I got your email this morning about.
Oh yeah, is that okay?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
I'll try and touch on it if I can, if it comes up naturally, but it's like, it's one of those things that I still just have to dodge a bit.
Yeah, no, I totally understand. I'm not my adoptive mother is a bit similar, because she's very private, and when I
private.
Yeah, it's almost it's who she is. It's like one of her character traits to be that way, but now at her detriment, because she doesn't, hasn't really been able to make kind of real deep and meaningful relationships with people because of that not opening up and really just being just really being herself. And and she's like, so it's I totally get it. I totally understand. Yeah.
She's basically having a nervous breakdown with me, like telling anyone my story, like at all. So
yeah.
But anyway, it's been good. She realized the world didn't end, because I've done a few of these, and she's realized it's okay.
Yeah. And I think, like, there's a natural protective mechanism that she's probably had for, this is not in the interview, by the way, because we are talking about my mum was very protective of me, and just had this notion in her mind that I was going to leave and go with my biological mum, just thinking, and in my mind it was never even a thing. It was just like, I was just curious. And I think there's like a definite distinction between, no, I'm not going to go and live with my mum. Like, I'm not going to go and live with my.
But it's even good my mum hasn't even got to the point where she could tell me that she was scared of me leaving.
Yeah. Well, my mum didn't say that either. I'm just assuming. I'm just being. Yeah. Yes. Okay. All right. So all right. Oh, thank you so much for thank you so much for coming on and wanting to share your part of your story and what you do and what you're doing now, and I guess how that's shaped your life, and the way that you have you're now relating to your children and that kind of thing, and how you're spreading your awareness in through writing a book and doing a picture book. And I think that's just fantastic and beautiful and amazing and brave and incredible. So it's just great to finally meet you, because I know when I spoke to Liz and she'd mentioned you, I was looked you up straight away, and I was like, I can't wait, hopefully I'll get to chat to you at some point. So today's the day.
Yes.
Yeah.
And thank you. I think what you've done, I was thinking this morning, I'm like, big ups to you. Like, it's really powerful. You're really creating a platform for people to kind of share their story, which I actually think is such a big part of everyone's journey, like getting to a place where they can share their own story. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I think the one of the
Amazing.
main things that I've learnt just through talking to other adoptees and getting them to share their story is adoptees crave that sense of belonging. And and I guess that's what I'm hoping this podcast can do, is give adoptees and the broader community that sense of belonging. Because initially I thought I was the only one that was adopted. That's just kind of how I perceived myself, as that I'm kind of the only one. It's very rare and it hardly ever happens. But as I've opened up and shared my story, it's not even a 6-degree separation thing. It's like, oh, that person and someone actually knows someone knows someone who is adopted or has a foster or any of that. So it's actually changed my belief around that. So yeah,
That's great. And I was thinking something similar this morning about how it's like when you go see a play, you realize and it makes you feel an emotion or see something, and you think, oh, until you see it, you think you're the only one that's ever felt like that. And then you see a play and you're like, no, it's the human experience. Like, this is part of being human, and it just makes you realize everyone's in it together, I think.
Yeah, I think that's exactly the same. And just to be part of that audience and in the crowd, you're all standing up together and cheering, and you can feel the energy of what happens when you go and see a play or a show or something like that. Everyone kind of, you're in that moment together. And maybe one day maybe we all can create that same kind of energy in a room with all adoptees. So that would be that would be a great thing.
Far-fetched at all.
Yeah.
I mean, you're essentially doing that now, like in these everyone in their little rooms.
Yeah. Well, hopefully see if it kind of just gets people feeling comfortable about adoption and sharing that a part of themselves that's really vulnerable, really you have to be able to trust the person that you're speaking with and open up in that way. So thank you for opening up to me today.
Let's
So what would you like to share with your adoption story and journey today?
My adoption story is this beautiful book with sort of dog-eared little pages, and I think there's still some pages missing in the book, but I think the older I get and the more I learn and the more sort of conversations I get to have with family, I am able to sort of fill in a few of the pages that are missing. And ultimately, I think it's a love story, and it's a story that began in the South Island of New Zealand when two teenagers made a baby, yours truly. And then my birth mum came over to Australia, essentially keeping it to herself, is my understanding, that she was pregnant. I recently found out that actually around the time of my birth, her older sister came out to be with her, and we've never, sadly, we're never really able to get to have a conversation where we really dug into things, but I've since found out from her, but there was one time when we were talking and she just slipped a throwaway line into a conversation where she said, oh, once when I had you, the nurses didn't let me hold you, which I think is a big part of, as I look back, I think that is part of the story in terms of that's the kind of society I was born into. That's the sort of society that my birth mum had me in. And, sort of going full cycle, when I had my own child and I'm in that moment and I've just given birth and there's that really powerful connection and your kid looks up at you and you hold them and there's just this like incredible, powerful understanding between the two of you. That sort of made me realize at that moment that something was really, I think, taken from us if we weren't able to have that moment together. But then my story, I went into foster care for a few weeks. Apparently it was about 6 weeks, and I was with this woman who by all accounts was an angel on earth, called Mrs. Moore, who took in a lot of kids on this temporary basis, and even adopted a daughter of her own. As I grew up, Mum kept in touch with her, but apparently Mum came and picked me up, and apparently I was dressed in a beautiful dress. I forgot the other lovely bit of my adoption story is that it's this great story that my mum tells, that she was cleaning the Venetian blinds at home, and she got a call, and they'd been, in the list, obviously trying to adopt. And then she got this call from a fax or community service worker saying, we've got this baby with brown hair and green eyes. And Mum's like, yeah, and they're like, well, do you want her? And Mum said, yes, I do, but I've got to check with my husband first, but we do, but don't give it to anyone else. And then she checked with my dad, and it was, they went and picked me up that day. They sent out my mum's sister and her parents. Apparently, I've still got the teddy bear that my aunt gave me that day. I keep saying to Mum, I tell the story as, Mum went to the shops to get a few essentials, and she's like, no, we went to a department store. She always says we went to a department store. And I'm like, all right, then you went to a department store and got some things for me. And then another cool bit of the story of my adoption story is that first night I slept in an upturned table because they didn't have enough time they didn't know I was going to come. So they didn't have a cot for me or a bed. So I slept in an upturned table, all safe and everything. Apparently Mum and Dad were waiting for me to wake up, and I was all of 6 or 7 weeks old, and I slept through the whole night. As a mum now, I'm like, oh my God, I was a good kid.
Yeah. Textbook baby.
Yeah, I was like, man, if only I got a kid delivered and slept through the night.
Yeah.
And then it was, I grew up in, had a pretty great life with a big backyard, and made tree houses with my friends. My parents actually separated when I was quite young. So I guess another sort of part of my story is mainly it just being me and Mum at home growing up, but I still have a very strong relationship with my dad, and for a time he lived on the same street as me. And he went on to marry and had my brother and sister, which is pretty special. Anyway, this is a very long story I'm telling.
No, it's fine.
But it probably the first chapter, I would say, or first sort of part of my story is very much when I always knew I was adopted. I don't remember ever being sat down and told, but I've always known, which I think is fantastic. But I sort of just privately thought about it every day and thought about wanting to meet my birth mum, but it wasn't something I sort of talked about, but it was something on my mind every day. And I always was conscious that I did want to try and meet. I always thought mainly of my birth mum, because for some reason I made up this story that my birth father probably wouldn't, given that he was a young guy, may not be that interested in me, which turned out to be quite the opposite. But my story was very much about sort of a private wondering about, where I fit in. And in the same way, I think a lot of teenagers are trying to sort their identity out in their head. There was that layer of where do I fit in and all of that in the mix. And then at 18, I wrote to my birth mum. My mum helped me go through, we got my birth mum's marriage certificate, and that was really exciting when I realised that I hadn't been blocked from accessing information about her. Found out her maiden name. Mum got a friend to help look through phone books, and I don't know how we deduced it, but we thought we pretty much had her. We thought we knew who she was and where she lived, and I wrote a letter that was very much that I, in the letter, I did some drawings on it, and I said, we met at the time I was 18. I was like, we met 18 years ago. and I'm just getting in touch again, sort of thing. And I signed it. She'd called me Rachel, and I signed off the letter Rachel, even though my name now is Dara. I guess another point in my story, around 16, probably when identity issues were at a bit of a peak, I did want to change my name back to Rachel. But I think my parents correctly encouraged me to make Rachel a middle name rather than changing my name completely. And then I wrote to my birth mum for about 2.5 years on and off. And that was really special. And we exchanged letters, and I slowly got more intense about asking if I could come visit. And then finally I sort of said, oh, I'm coming to New Zealand to really put get things moving. And when I was 20, just before my 21st birthday, I got on a plane without having ever seen a photo of her, and went to meet her, and also spent a week with her. I look back now and it's a bit nuts. Like I just rocked up and spent a week with her sight unseen, and then went to the other part of the South Island of New Zealand and spent a week with my birth father. And then, that part of the story is very much about getting to know them. And for me, that was very powerful. I literally can remember at my 21st birthday feeling like surrounded by love and whole, and like all that wondering and not knowing had really been replaced with a sense of, being surrounded by love and being, I think up until then, the theme of my story had been more about lack and thinking, I don't have this, and I don't know where my birth parents come from. I don't know who they are. Don't know if I can ever meet them, to feeling actually sort of a story about feeling lucky and actually having more love than the average person, like realizing, because my birth parents actually aren't together, they've married and they had 2 children each. I just kind of literally felt bombarded by new people and family love, which was really powerful. And then it's sort of, it was an interesting thing for me. I think I was thinking about it earlier today, and I think it might be a little akin to like when you have a toddler, like when they're really little, they have the courage to go off if they know they can turn around and see their mum or see their dad. And I think for me, after meeting them, I kind of gained a strength where I didn't need to stay in touch regularly, just the power of knowing they were there and that they'd welcomed me into their lives, and that there was a place for me, and that I could kind of patch up those bits of me I didn't necessarily understand, gave me strength. And honestly, we didn't keep in touch. Like there would be years where it was just Christmas where we exchanged letters and things like that. And yeah, I guess it's just all that first meet that I went across probably 5 trips in total so far. But they were very much, there was more when I was younger. And then, since I've had kids and things, that spread out. But my most recent trip, I know, was when my firstborn was 4 months old. We went across and introduced him to my family, which was really special. And he's 5 now. And I was due to go, but because of COVID, I haven't gone, but hopefully planning to go back soon to New Zealand. So that's sort of a checkered, long, short story.
Yeah, wow. And I guess when you turned 18 and you wanted that information, you were, you're probably relieved that, there was no veto, no block from their end. And then were you worried at all? I know some adoptees feel, I guess, that they might get a second rejection, or were you just kind of like, I need to write this letter and just see what happens, or you kind of just felt that it would be well received?
My biggest fear was that my birth mum wouldn't be alive. That was my biggest fear. It didn't occur to me that they might. I think actually once I sent it, I did realize there was a risk that it would not be responded to. And I can remember my driving with my mum and her passing me an envelope, and then me realizing when I opened it that it was like a letter from New Zealand and it was probably a reply. And when I opened it and could see, I'm probably going to cry, could see that my birth mum had written back to me. Yeah, I just bawled my eyes out because I think I'd kept it all internally, but the relief of realizing that wasn't the way the story was going to go was like, oh my God, like she's alive. And yeah, that sort of pent up fear or emotion or whatever sort of 20 years came out.
Yeah. And I it said, I read somewhere that you knew it was her straight away.
Well, it was interesting. So when I flew across when I was 20, she sort of suggested, oh, let's not exchange photos or anything. So I walked out into the airport. What do you call those things?
Terminal?
The terminal. Walked out into the airport terminal, and there was a few people waiting, and I looked out and I'm like, there's no one that really fits the bill here. And I think then I had that little surge of fear of like, oh my goodness, maybe she's not coming. And I went over and just sat down in the seats and was waiting. And then I saw a woman come in blowing her nose, and I knew that was her. And I think I knew it was her primarily because of her demeanor. Like I wasn't necessarily an instant. I actually look a lot, probably more like my birth father than I look like her. But it was just like, yeah, it was like I knew it was her. Yeah. So, and then it's a funny thing, that first meeting, because we'd been writing, but there's this sense of, it's almost like a first date, but with a massive, massive lead up where you've been like texting for 20 years. And then you're like, wow, this date is really overdue. So it's quite strange in that you've got a lot of anticipation, but you still can't, you're not going to go on your first date and like go into your whole life story and all of that. So you're still talking about, the weather and
how your flight was, and
how the flight was and how the food was. And meanwhile, there's these massive elephants in the room, or the car, as the case was, on the way to her place. And I look back and I think it's to their credit that they put me out. They had 2 young children, had to juggle life with this new person that just lobbed in for a week and didn't go anywhere for a week. Luckily they had a motel, so I was sort of down in the motel room, which meant they could still have a bit of life and I could have a bit of privacy. And then again, meeting my birth, I got on a bus, went further down the South Island, and again, I knew it was my birth father. When we pulled up, again, the way he was looking, the way he was waiting, and when I met him, that was much more like, I was like, oh, now I know where I get my big teeth from. Those sorts of things. There was a sort of I can definitely see parts of myself in my birth mum, but there were also things I could recognize in the way he looked, and also his sort of personality and characteristics as well. Which is, for me, again, I guess that's another powerful piece of the puzzle, to just sort of kind of see a bit of yourself looking back at you is quite special.
Absolutely. It is powerful, the power of finding that recognition in someone else, visually, not just kind of in more subtle ways. But so I guess you met your birth mum first, and you were sort of thinking, maybe you're like, oh, I don't resemble her in a physical sense. But then when you met your birth father, it was a sort of like an instant recognition of, yes, I definitely have got your genes a bit more than your birth mum, perhaps.
I think I still did see similarities with my birth mum, but I think it's more like on my face I look more like my birth father. So it's sort of more obvious. It's more, I think that might be it, that your first impression, there's definitely things that are more obvious where I look more like my birth father, but there are similarities with my birth mum as well.
Yeah. And that's a beautiful story. Thank you so much for sharing that. What's your relationship with them now?
I should actually just say that a big part of my story, I should say as well, like, obviously, like, yeah, there's my adoptive parents as well. Like, to me, they're my parents, and my whole life, literally, like, that story is, I guess, because we're in this situation talking about adoption, that's what I'm focusing on. But in terms of my life, if it were just sort of not necessarily having this lens on it, obviously my parents are a massive part of my life. And then my dad remarrying and having kids, like my brother and sister, are a massive part of my life as well. And everything since. So yeah, it's a big jumbled in love story.
Yeah. So it's like, you feel a lot more whole now that you've met your birth parents. But they're not sort of replaceable or anything like that with what you originally had. It was just maybe your the way you thought, how you said you thought you were lacking something when and then once you met them, now you feel even more full. And that's a really good thing to have, a good outcome. It sounds like a real positive experience that you've had.
Yeah, I think it really has been. And back, and I feel lucky that I was able to meet my birth parents. But I think the other thing you do realize when you meet your birth parents is there's still a lot that, you literally haven't shared those 20, at the time when I first met them, there's 20 years of, growing up and things that they weren't part of. And there's my whole life now that, to an extent, my family from overseas are part of. But yeah, it's sort of, I'm not sure what I'm trying to say. I'll start again. I think, I can't remember what we're talking about. I think it can be sort of strange in that your birth parents are so important to you. But at the end of the day, I haven't actually clocked that many hours with them either. So I've just got this strong sense that it's my family that know me and have shaped me as well. Like, this experience has shaped me, but primarily it's my life, like the day-to-day parts of my life that have shaped me as well.
Yeah. So it doesn't, it's important when, you're asking those questions as a teenager and forming your identity and sense of self. But once meeting them, you realize that they are only, like, I guess, a small fraction. It's an important fraction, but it's a small fraction in terms of how you've been brought up with your adoptive family and the extended family and all those experiences that you've had with them. So it's a necessary part, it's a key part to finding them. But once you do find them, you realize, like you said, you haven't really spent a lot of time with them because you don't need to. You feel full. You feel like you've got enough out of that experience to have that full picture and to have your identity, I guess, revealed, where you can feel comfortable. And that's kind of how I felt as well. But yeah, thanks for your story. I wanted to agree with you when you said, just in terms of meeting your birth mum for the first time, it's sort of like it's so plutonic and so it's both. It's like, you sort of saying, oh, hi, how are you? And you give a little sort of hug. It's so deep in one respect, but so kind of on the surface in the other. And it's kind of really hard to absorb it all in. So you're trying to meet halfway because you don't want to get too overwhelmed by the experience. But at the same time, you don't want to underwhelm it as well. So yeah, I can just imagine you at the airport just sort of, just in being in the airport, that environment, and just sort of going, oh, hi, it's like such a big moment, but you're at the airport, it's busy, there's like people just kind of shuffling around.
Totally.
Yeah, it's like, okay, yeah, this is a bit strange.
Well, it just keeps on going. I think it was interesting recently, I was writing about the experience, and I was trying to convey this feeling I had in the airport that I literally left my body and was floating above it. And I've since realized that I probably dissociated, and I think that's because it was such a big, intense thing. And other things that happen around that time too, I actually think even on a really deep level, there's the surface level, but I actually think like it's a massive thing on sort of even at the level of your sort of organs and your body and your nervous system to be going through that experience. Big things are happening, but meanwhile you're sort of like swanning around like a swan on top, chitter chattering.
Yeah.
But underneath your whole system is like, oh my God, this is my mum.
Yeah. The build up and the reveal is intense. There's like adrenaline and just that chitter chatter, that unnecessary, like, jibber jabber, but you kind of don't really know how else to handle a situation like that. So I understand. I wanted to, I've got all the questions here. So I was just, we've sort of gone through a couple of them already, but did you want to share what happened when you lost your birth mother and that what impact that had on you?
Yeah. So I lost my birth mother last year, midway through the year. And I think it's a bit heavy to talk about. Like, a lot of my story I think is full of joy, but it's heavy, as I think losing anyone important is heavy. But I think I'm reflecting about it recently. I think adoption's a pretty major thing to happen. And I think for me, it happened when I was 0. And I think what that means is you're not consciously processing this very big thing that happens to you at that time, or maybe you are, but you're processing it in some way. And then I think in losing my birth mum, there was sadness around not being able to get to the actual service because of COVID, and there was sadness for losing her. But I think it was really compounded by the fact that losing her was actually also in addition to losing her, which is just sad and tragic because she was so young, and worrying about her kids and worrying about her husband, is this sort of undertow of, it brought up for me that initial loss, which I feel like I'd never perhaps properly processed, the fact that that was a pretty big separation that occurred for us way back in the beginning. And I think in losing her again to death in this really somewhat final way, I was not only grieving losing her physically, I was grieving the original loss that we had and I had, which I think made it. And I think the other thing that's hard about it is, I mean, I was really lucky. I had like a lot of supportive family and friends. But it's, I think, society sort of knows how to package things up in terms of, oh, if you lose your mum, people know that's a big deal. If you lose your partner, that's a big deal. But it sort of falls into this other category where I think most people close to you get it, but it's sort of harder to explain to the rest, to the wider circle, like at work and things like that. So as you can tell, it's still a bit raw.
I'm so sorry.
But the really beautiful thing that came out of it, I might just pause and then I can stop crying and then I'll start again.
It's very raw, and like you were saying before, it is it is that cellular level experience, and your body is essentially talking to you and communicating that loss and that grief and that trauma. And like you said, it's compounded everything, because you don't really get the opportunity to have outlets in this way. And then it's until something like that happens, it's just all come up like a volcano. It just sits there dormant until something happens where it sort of gives you a sense of allowance of, well, yeah, I need to release it, and I can release it. And but events and stuff before that, you don't really get the opportunity to share that with many people, or deal with it. So yeah.
No, I think that's right. And I think that's one of the really beautiful things. Like, it was this horrible but also beautiful thing that happened in the end, actually. I'd actually written a book, and I got the book to her 2 weeks before she passed, and I really believe that the book opened doorways for us, and I put a message in for her, and really the whole book in a way was also a message to her. But what ended up happening was her gorgeous daughters invited and her husband invited me to actually do a recording and speak at the funeral, because I couldn't be there. And then they also included me in the her obituary, as saying, calling me out as her daughter. And like that in itself, like that symbolism, I think when you're adopted, you're often looking around to go, where do I fit in? And, do they consider me family, or am I just sort of a later add-on? And that was really symbolic and powerful for me to have, see my name and to be called her daughter outwardly. So it was hard, and it still is hard, but beautiful things have flown from it. Like, her daughters are just extraordinary, and I've actually had a conversation with her sister, who we just really get each other, and I think we really click, and that was special. And when I get over to New Zealand and we're able to have another ceremony, I think that'll be another really important part of my story, getting to meet her side of the family, which I never actually did. I met her immediate family, but I never was really introduced to the extended family. And I'm quite looking forward to being able to meet the extended family.
Yeah, I think the timing of all of this is quite profound as well. I mean, this all kind of happened at the end of last year, and then you, at the exact same time, you released your book. And I just think, how does, I love how life sort of happens like that. It's
I've really, some people might think I sound crazy and woo-woo, but I'm actually convinced that it's all sort of connected, and that the book, I thought I was writing a book primarily for kids, like, kids who are fostered and adopted, to be like, you're awesome and you're loved and all of that. But I think there was all these other sort of reasons it got written as well. And one of them was to get to Jill. She passed really suddenly. We weren't expecting her to go so soon. So it meant that I could send across some voice recordings, but I've since found out she wasn't really conscious to get them. So really the last proper communication I had with her was the book and the note in it to tell her how much I loved her. And I told her that I thought about her every day. And so I just feel like it, and it's quite beautiful. Like, the idea to write the book came to me when I'd had my son, and it took me, quite a few years to bring it to fruition. And then it's ready as a sort of, I think it's also been, not only has it been this way of getting a message to her, but it's also sort of been my own, it's been a bit of a healing process for me, that I could focus on the book and focus on a special message, and focus on sort of giving back in a way, at a time when it was a bit hard.
Yeah, I think that's amazing. I think something like that that truly comes from deep within inside you as part of healing, and then you've just produced this amazing, incredible book that you can share with your children, and I can share with my children. And it's not just for adoptees, is it? It's for anyone.
That's
it's
the
for any
thing.
blended family. I think it's just having a better understanding of adoption in general, from, you know, teaching kids at such a young age as well, builds that tolerance for them to know, you know, everybody's different. Not everyone has this sort of nuclear family, and that's all okay, and that's fine, and everyone is loved just the same. I think that's a really important message out there. And yeah, tell me about the book.
Yeah.
Just tell me about what's
I'll tell you one cool story just following on from that
yeah.
a couple of days ago, my friend who I went to school with, as you were saying, once you start talking about adoption, it pops up everywhere. But a school friend who has actually adopted 2 girls, and by this beautiful miracle story that's not mine to tell, also has a biological child. She sent me a message where, like, her sister's kids who aren't adopted have taken the book to daycare. And she sent me a photo of this big post up on the wall. The book's called We Love You Hundreds and Thousands. And in the last page of the book, there's sort of a heart where it says, who loves you hundreds and thousands, draw the picture of them here and keep them in your heart forever. And they've got this big thing up on their wall at daycare of this big poster, we love you hundreds and thousands. And all these kids, adopted, not adopted, who knows, probably maybe none of them adopted, have all drawn in who loves them hundreds and thousands. And it's this big sort of wall display. And for me, that just made me so happy. And then, you know, I've got, since writing the book, other things have come in, like another amazing woman I've met sent me a photo of her kid, you know, who now gets hundreds and thousands on his ice creams, and, you know, someone else telling me their kid puts hundreds and thousands, their kids, on their pancakes, and I just feel like it's this nice thing that's out in the world. But the book is a story about a girl called Jasmine, and she loves birthday parties, and she has these awesome birthday parties, including like birthday party with slip and slides and marshmallow cake, and you go through her like a couple of really cool birthday parties, and it's a story that is a bit of a portal into her world, and she's adopted, and there's bright, beautiful illustrations, and I basically just wanted to convey love. I think a lot of the books that I could see on sort of library shelves and stuff about adoption were quite sort of heavy and didactic books about adoption, and this is what adoption is and blah blah blah, but I wanted there to be a book for kids that just sort of shared adoption but wasn't all about adoption. So it was like, you know, it's mainly, what kid doesn't like birthday parties? So it's a book about birthday parties, and it just so happens that this girl is adopted as well. But it was sort of a project I wanted to do so that kids, as you say, it's like I did have kids in mind, kids who are fostered and adopted in mind, but I do think it's a book for everyone. In the end, I actually self-published the book, and I got feedback from a few publishers I approached and agents along the line. They were sort of saying, oh, it's not a very big market, and they're quite, you know, they'd looked up the stats around how many kids are adopted and thought they're not that many. And I actually think I really do believe strongly that it's sort of a book that belongs in every library and every school library. It's just like, you know, rainbow families. Not everyone's in a rainbow family, but it's important for all kids to see a book about rainbow families and just appreciate diversity and appreciate like the spectrum of life experience from a young age. And I think that my experience with adoption is I was brought up in a time when it was closed adoption. So it wasn't open adoption. I didn't know who my birth parents were, and we didn't talk about me being adopted very much. And I actually think that's probably the most problematic part of my experience, I think, because I think it's not I think it's not helpful for little kids to get some sense that part of them isn't something they should share with the world, because it can show up in all lots of weird ways in your life. I think if you think, oh, I can't fully be myself for whatever reason. So I just think the more that we sort of talk about, you know, I share my story, you share your story, the more it becomes just part of our community and something we're open about, the less stigma there is. And then I think in turn the experience for kids who are adopted and fostered, the path may not feel quite as, you know, tricky sometimes.
That was probably the best summary I've ever heard. That's fantastic.
Going
you are on
I'm
fire.
Really ranting.
You are on fire. That was so good. That was
stick with me through the tears and I'll see what I can do.
Oh, that was so good. Oh, I just it could not have been said better. And yeah, hats off to you. And you've obviously, you know, doing the work that you're doing and your experience and writing the book. Yeah, it's just amazing that you've done something so great. And I agree 100% with everything that you're saying, you know, right down to from putting it in childcare centres and the teachers creating like a scaffold where things go up on the wall, and then they can talk about different topics and about, yeah, like you said, diversity. And I even love the heading hundreds and thousands, because kids love hundreds and thousands on their ice cream and on pancakes, and even the hundreds and thousands themselves, like all the different colors, you know, can represent all the different types of people and community. And yeah, I just love it. I think it's great. And there's always going to be critics out there that are going to say, oh, well, your target audience and you're not catering to the general population. And I disagree completely. I mean, just because, you know, we're in the minority, there's not that many adoptees in the community. Well, you know, it's still important, like you said, with rainbow families, you know, they would be considered a minority family too. But it doesn't make it less important. And in fact, I think it makes it more important for the general population to know about what goes on, that they're not, that everyone isn't the same, that the general population and families can say, well, you know, if you've got people in your community, there's a chance that they could be a rainbow family. There's a chance that they could be fostering. You just don't know until you sort of open that communication channel and really have that empathy and support and community support. And I know in our area, like in Sydney with Liz and all of that, she's really trying to foster that community support and awareness. And yeah, and you're generating that awareness. And yeah, the more of us that share our stories and do have our creative outlet, the more it becomes, it's almost like we're setting it up for our kids to be more open, more tolerant, more considerate of other people and what they've gone through in their lives. So I think it's a positive feeling.
It does feel like a bit of a generational shift around a lot of things in this. Yeah, we're just realizing that, you know, with diversity comes a richness, and we're all better for it, apart from it just being, I think, the right thing to do. But Liz, what an extraordinary woman. Her story is really amazing. And Can I just do, I don't know if I can I do a shout out? It would be so cool if you feel comfortable, if I could do like if anyone out there like knows librarians or teachers or anything like that, like just say, like, it'd be so awesome if people want to check out the book and see if we can get it into more live.
I could do it as a VO. like you could, maybe you can write what
at the end,
yeah, maybe, and then so that we'd finish your story, and then I say, for more information about Hundreds and Thousands book, head to this website, blah blah blah. So maybe you can send me a text or an email with all the stuff you want me to say, and I could say it at the end.
Or I could just okay, do it. I trust you to do it, I think, but I'll just because my dream for the book would be for it to not be just this book that ends up only with kids who are adopted. Like, it'd be so good to get it into school libraries and local libraries and things like that all over the world.
Absolutely, I agree. Yeah, it definitely has its place, and not just with the adoptive community. It should just be more broad. Yeah. Did you want to share anything about like your, I know that you're in the did you want to talk about like your work in terms of, you know, how you're ministerial advisor or anything like that, or do you just want to kind of leave it about?
Tricky for me to talk about it because I think minister's office is sort of tricky. It's all supposed to be a bit in tone.
Just to know that you're part of that is good. I can mention that at the start.
Yeah. I'm happy to go to that. Like, I think it would tie in if you go that number 7 question, like, what would you like to see more of? Because we've just been saying.
Oh, yeah.
And then the next, those sorts of 2 would probably lead on. Yeah.
Before I asked that, I was thinking you might want to this is just an idea. You know how you've written a book about hundreds of thousands, you could write about your experience now with your birth, like, side of the family as well. Like, it could almost have like a second version, because you are I guess experiencing relationships with your siblings, your half sister, and how close you are to them. And so
that's really, I have a little something I'm plotting in my head. I think, but I agree, I think there might be another book. And it's nice to hear you say that, because there's part of me is like, maybe you I'm like, oh, is it banging on a point too much? But I actually feel like I'd like to do a book for a slightly older audience that's slightly more involved, that could be kind of used as part of curriculum as well in schools, for more like the age 8 age group. I think my book's targeted at quite a young age, and that was on purpose, because I wanted to like get into little kids' heads really young, and sow the seed that you know, particularly for kids who are adopted and fostered, that they're loved and they're surrounded by love. But I think there's still potential for an older category, sort of a slightly longer form book, to go into a bit more of the narrative. And I think that's a beautiful point, that it's sort of, the narrative is still incomplete, like there's still more to be added. And that I love it.
I think so. I think it's a great idea. Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head with the target audience of like the kids age 3 to 5 space, or even a bit older. And then you can, you know, who knows, you can go into that older, where the 8-year-olds, they start asking questions, they're very curious and inquisitive. And it's, I think there's definitely room for where kids can learn through books. Is really powerful. So we'll watch this space for you. It's exciting. Yeah.
I'm not having another kid. I tend to do this on maternity leave, so I'll have to come up with some other plan. But I'll chip away at it.
I'm sure it'll come to you, you know, because you've got all that experience and those feelings as well, and your own experience. You can draw from that.
You're a wise woman. I actually do feel it brewing. I feel a little, yeah.
It's brewing. I love it.
I literally started 2 days ago. I started writing some notes. So it's quite lovely to get this encouragement and from you to be like, keep going.
Yes, I 100%. I am with you. Yep. Do it.
You keep going with your amazing podcast. I'll make you a deal.
Oh, okay. All right. I'll try. Okay. So we'll go back to, so what would you like to see more of in the future for adopted children who have the same sorts of challenges that you've had?
I think heading towards open adoption is really good, and that's a really positive step. I think we just more of this, more sharing, more stories, platforms for people to share their experience. I think what I really want to see in terms of social change, I perhaps feel most strongly about kids who are in out of home care. I think we have a long way to go in terms of still having a system where a lot of kids in foster care still go through many placements, still come out, leave foster care at 18 with no safety net. I think we're really fortunate in so many ways as people who are adopted that, if it's a fairly positive experience for people, we do have a family and, social and legal ties. And not every kid in foster care gets that. A lot of kids do form those bonds, but a lot of kids find themselves really on their own at 18. And there's, problems with homelessness and education outcomes. And I think it's for me to talk about, but I think we've also got a lot of reckoning to do around Aboriginal kids in out-of-home care, and a lot of work around that. And I think there's important work going on around closing the gap in terms of the overrepresentation of Aboriginal kids in out-of-home care. That's where I think I want to see most change happen. Is I just want to see in 20 years that kids who are in out-of-home care just don't have such a hard time of it, I think is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I agree with everything that you've just said. Do you think funding is an issue? And who do you think it relies on? Like, is it sort of the government needs to kind of create these social changes and helping Aboriginal kids and closing the gap, or does a lot of that fall on the NGOs, do you think?
Well, I think under our current system, a lot of responsibility is placed on NGOs, but I think the answer to your question is there's still a massive responsibility for government, and I don't think contracting NGOs to deliver services absolves government of their responsibilities to still make sure that outcomes for kids in out-of-home care are better. They need to be a lot better than what they currently are. And I think there's a lot of good work going on around this, but I think it does take money. A lot of, I think a lot of kids, particularly those in out-of-home care, can have experienced trauma in their lifetime. And it's not just finding placements, it's all the other stuff like supporting, intensive services so that they can get any additional supports they need to kind of get on track and do really, really well in life.
Yeah, it seems really strange this day and age that there are foster care kids that are going right through to 18, and then what really happens once they are technically adults, but they're still just babies, at 18, and if they don't have any family that they can turn to, or that sense of belonging or support, or sometimes I just think, well, what do they do at Christmas time? What do they do when it's their birthday? Like, who who can they rely on if they've just been in and out of foster care their whole life? And why has that particular child been kind of, I feel like, shuffled around, no permanent, no, there's no real permanent fixture for those children. And it's just, I just don't know. That's just not, that shouldn't even be an option. And I just don't know why that's actually happening, where it is,
Yeah, I
it is
agree.
still happening.
Yeah. I think that's the thing. It's like, if you said, where do we want to be in 50 years? I mean, I don't pretend to have any of the answers, or definitely not all of the answers, but yeah, it has to look different, right? It doesn't, I think we probably both relate to it, you know, through the work that I've done being a children's lawyer and seeing the struggle that a lot of kids in out of home care are going through when, you know, unmet needs of theirs, I believe, are playing out, and they end up up in the criminal justice system. They just, I don't know, I just relate. It's like, I just really deeply believe that children need love and safety and security. And I think we sort of, you know, even when we had relative security, there's still something that happens when you're untethered from your family of origin. There's still something you're processing that I can't even begin to imagine how hard that would be. If on top of that, you've got all these systems to deal with, you're feeling unsupported, you've got to walk into how many homes and try and meet them and fit in. And I can't even imagine. And then you add kind of if you actually haven't been supported to keep in touch with your family, if I know sometimes it's not appropriate, but it's really, really complex and hard. But I feel for those kids deeply.
Yeah, because I guess at some point in their lives at a particular age, they're going to have to change the way they think and think, well, I can't rely on anyone. I don't trust anyone. It's all about, I've just got to fend for myself. And once that is set in stone, it's probably really hard to change for the rest of their lives. And like you said, it can play out in different ways. And unfortunately for some kids, they do end up in the criminal justice system, and that whole thing could have been prevented if that child had a permanent home from, say, I mean, I don't know what the age would be where they are more and more vulnerable to having a really, distrustful mindset. But it'd have to be, under 10. You needs to be all kind of sorted by the time that child goes to school. And
I agree. And I think it could look, in the future, it could look quite different. It could look like more early support, so that if a family's struggling, we're sort of stepping in. So we're not just removing at a crisis point. But yeah, if it is necessary that there is a removal, that permanency is the priority, which definitely in New South Wales, that's what the legislation puts a focus on. I think there's just a practical thing as well. Like, even with relative privilege, I live in Sydney. Look at Sydney house prices. And it's like, if you don't have anyone behind you to help you through uni, if you don't have anyone behind you when you go for 2 job interviews and don't get them, and someone to turn around and say, don't worry, you're awesome, keep going, or if you don't have that, and then you don't have, someone to turn to if you're like, crap, I can't pay rent this week, that sort of thing, that just compounds. And then your life options are really different, I think, in our society at the moment.
Yeah. And even going back further, I just think about just being a school kid and just automatically feeling different. And if you're in a foster care arrangement, are you doing your own washing? Are you making your lunch? Then you've got to get to school and concentrate on the work at school academically, plus develop social friendships and develop, healthy emotional attachments and things like that. I mean, that can't be that has to be learnt. It has to be taught from who you're around, and if they're not getting that, then they kind of have to create those ideas themselves, and it could be really unhealthy. And I just think it's just so sad that it can just start from such a young age.
Yes. Yeah, I think I agree completely. And I think there's some good people doing some good work, I think, to campaign to raise the age so that kids can be supported past the age of 18. And I think they've made those policy changes overseas. Some people, I think, don't agree with that, because I think people who see the limitations with the current system think it's problematic if you're still in the same system for longer. But I'm sure there's a range of policy things we can do to make sure that kids exiting care don't sort of fall off a cliff when they exit care. And that's the sort of thing I'd like to see do and do better by these kids. To just get to where they I think some people maybe don't even realize, like you're saying, when you unpack what they're living through, like just how much they've got on their plate. They're pretty amazing. They're pretty resilient, these kids.
Yeah. So there's probably definitely a space for that 18 to 24 for children who have been in out of home care for their whole lives, that they do need some support in terms of education, help with, creating a CV, maybe some cooking skills, that kind of a thing, and also helping them foster, long-lasting relationships. So there's probably definitely a need for those kids for that age group.
I agree, but the dreamer in me is like, I think also we've got to look at housing and university, like fees and all those sorts of things. Like maybe we really present these kids with options to really get better outcomes in their lives.
Yeah, definite subsidies, or if not free. I mean, if the government has lacked those kind of support for those kids, that they haven't found a permanent place, then why wouldn't they, give them an opportunity for some free education? And like you said, housing, and lots to do. But it sounds like you're in
lots to do.
Sounds like you're in the absolute right field to put your views forward. And I think it's amazing what you're doing, and hopefully new book and new policies, and that's
you've got my life plan mapped out for me.
your 50-year plan goes like this. Oh no, thank you so much. We could probably finish there, and if you wanted,
okay,
I think what
totally.
We've said today is amazing. And
that sounds great. Thank you. Sorry, I didn't plan to cry. I knew I might cry talking about my birth mum, but I did cry a fair bit. But anyway, I figure
it's really raw. It's really raw, and I think it's important. I think it's it's normal, it's healthy, and when it comes, it just comes. Obviously, it needs to. You're speaking from the heart as well.
Yeah.
So you probably spend the next couple of days.
How much longer are you?
Hey.
Oh, sorry, you go.
I was just going to
say how much longer are you away for, so I can be jealous of you. Not jealous, but happy for you.
Oh, we're away for a year. We're going away. We're away for a year.
And are you in a motorhome or a caravan?
In a caravan. We're in a Jayco.
You're in a caravan. Yeah, we just bought a caravan. In what?
A Jayco.
Cool.
I might stop the recording and see what happens.
Yeah.